My ex used me for years, then invited me to his wedding, but my +1 made him regret it instantly. I could not believe what I had just overheard. For years, I had quietly suspected that Liam, my ex-boyfriend, had taken advantage of my kindness, but hearing the truth spoken so openly shattered me. He had been using me from the very beginning, stringing me along, letting me cover most of his rent, and exploiting my generosity. And now, here he was, laughing about it with his new fiancée Natalie, as if I had been nothing more than a joke. Humiliated, I forced myself to retreat to my room, swallowing the sobs that threatened to escape. I refused to let them see me in such a state. The rest of the night passed in silent tears as I buried my face into my pillow, trying to process the betrayal. By morning, Liam was gone. He had packed up the last of his things and officially moved out. As I walked through the now empty apartment, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The weight of his presence was finally lifted, and I was free. I danced around the house, tears of joy replacing the ones of sorrow. Determined to erase every trace of him, I spent the next few days deep cleaning every inch of my home, removing every memory of our years together. Life without Liam turned out to be unexpectedly peaceful. I rediscovered the joy of solitude, the beauty of having space and time to myself. Weeks passed, and I stopped caring about what he or Natalie had said about me. I had moved on, or so I thought, until 2 months later when a mutual friend at work mentioned something that caught me off guard. Liam was getting married to Natalie. The news hit me strangely, not with heartbreak, but with a bitter taste of irony. How quickly they had moved on. My friends showed me their engagement pictures, and while they looked happy, I felt nothing but detached curiosity. If Liam had found happiness, so be it. I knew I would never have been truly satisfied with him anyway. That evening, when I checked my mail, an elegant envelope sat among my usual bills. It was a wedding invitation from Liam and Natalie. At first I thought it must have been a mistake or a formality, an impersonal extension of courtesy. But inside, scrawled in the corner, was a handwritten note from Liam. "I want you to attend my wedding so you can see the grand life I'm going to have with Natalie." My fingers tightened around the invitation. He had invited me solely to gloat. The audacity, after all he had done, was staggering. The anger I had buried came surging back, and with it, a plan began to form in my mind. If Liam wanted me to witness his so-called success, I would, but on my terms. I RSVP'd yes. And I had the perfect +1 in mind. Through a little bit of research, I found Natalie's old social media posts. As luck would have it, she had recently ended a long-term relationship with a man named Eric. Their history dated back to high school, which meant they had been together for a significant period before she left him for Liam. Curious, I reached out to Eric. To my surprise, he responded. I was upfront with him about my intentions. I wanted him to accompany me to Liam and Natalie's wedding. At first, he seemed hesitant, but as our conversations deepened, he began to share his own experiences. It turned out that Natalie had cheated on him multiple times, her final betrayal being with Liam. Unlike me, he had suspected it at the time, but had been powerless to stop it. We talked for weeks, bonding over our shared wounds. He told me how much he had loved Natalie, how her betrayal had devastated him, and how he had eventually forced himself to move on. Hearing his story, I felt a strange sense of camaraderie. In the end, Eric agreed to attend the wedding with me. It wasn't about seeking revenge, it was about reclaiming our dignity in front of those who had discarded us. The day of the wedding arrived. As Eric and I stepped into the grand venue, I felt a rush of satisfaction. Liam's expression when he saw us was priceless. His confident smirk disappeared instantly, replaced by disbelief. He immediately recognized Eric. We ignored him, gracefully finding our seats. I could feel Liam's eyes burning into me from across the room, but he was powerless to do anything in front of his guests. The ceremony began, and as everyone stood to welcome the bride, Natalie entered, stunning in her flowing white gown. As she walked down the aisle, her gaze swept across the guests. Then her eyes landed on us. Her graceful steps faltered for a brief second before she composed herself and continued walking. But I saw it. The shock. The recognition. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, and soon we moved to the reception hall. Natalie, having changed into a different dress, finally noticed us properly. Her reaction was even more dramatic than Liam's. She visibly stiffened, then turned to Eric with wide eyes, as though struggling to process his presence. I could almost hear the questions racing through her mind. Eric and I maintained our composure, engaging in casual conversation as though we were simply enjoying a beautiful wedding. But when Natalie finally mustered the courage to approach us, I saw the panic creeping into her features. She asked Eric why he was there, her voice low and tense. Eric didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her face for a long moment before excusing himself and asking to speak with her privately. They stepped away, disappearing into a secluded corner of the venue. Meanwhile, Liam sat rigid, watching them with an unreadable expression. He couldn't leave his spot without drawing attention, but I could tell he was struggling to remain composed. Minutes turned into an hour, and whispers began circulating among the guests. Where was the bride? Her absence became more noticeable as time passed. Concerned murmurs turned into hushed speculation. Eventually, one of the bridesmaids rushed in, breathless, holding a folded piece of paper. With a hesitant voice, she announced that Natalie had left. The crowd fell into stunned silence. The note revealed that seeing Eric had made her realize she had never truly stopped loving him. She had made a mistake in marrying Liam and could not go through with it. The guests sat in disbelief, eyes darting between Liam, the note, and the empty space where the bride should have been. Liam stood frozen, his moment of triumph crumbling around him. The very event he had orchestrated to flaunt his new life had become his greatest humiliation. I was as surprised as everyone else. While I had intended to ruffle Liam's feathers, I never expected Natalie to abandon the wedding entirely. The magnitude of the situation was far beyond anything I had planned. After that day, my life moved forward. I kept my distance from the drama that followed. Liam, however, did not let things go so easily. He called me, sent messages filled with blame and resentment, accusing me of ruining his life. When I ignored him, he showed up at my doorstep, demanding answers. I refused to let him in, speaking to him only through the barely open door. His voice was filled with rage as he shouted about how I had destroyed everything for him. He had quit his job, believing that his marriage to Natalie would secure him a life of luxury. Now, with no wife, no job, and no future, he saw me as the cause of his downfall. I let him vent, listening quietly. And then, in a calm voice, I told him the truth. He had destroyed his own life. I had heard everything he had said about me that night with Natalie. I knew he had used me. I had forgiven it, moved on, and stayed out of his affairs. But he had been the one to drag me back into it by inviting me to his wedding just to gloat. His face turned pale as the realization dawned on him. That was the last time I saw him. I changed my locks, installed a security camera, and ensured he could never bother me again. A month later, I met Eric one last time. He and Natalie were together, and though it felt strange, I wished them well. They had found their way back to each other, and while I had no interest in staying in touch, I hoped they had learned from their mistakes. As for me, I had learned the most valuable lesson of all: never let someone else's pettiness drag me down. Moving forward, I poured my energy into my career, my happiness, and my own life. Liam had tried to flaunt his success in front of me, but in the end, he had only exposed his own downfall. And to those of you watching who love a good tale of poetic justice, well, let's just say there's plenty more where that came from. Stick around, because you never know when life might serve another dose of karma. You wouldn't want to miss it, would you?